Have you ever sat at the kitchen table with a warm cup of tea and felt that hush, that stillness that fills the room when you live alone? For some, it's peaceful. For others, it's a bit too quiet. And sometimes it's both. There's a kind of ache that can settle in when the house once filled with voices now holds only your own. The dishes are fewer. The lights stay off in half the rooms. And yet the heart remains just as full with memories, with wisdom, with stories that still long to be shared. Maybe you never imagined living alone at this stage of life. Maybe it was a choice you made. Or maybe it came quietly, a spouse gone, children moved far away, friends slowly fading into phone calls instead of visits. However it arrived, it's here now. And the question becomes, how do we fill these days, not just with things to do, but with meaning? Living alone after 60 doesn't have to mean being lonely. In fact, it can be one of the most quietly powerful chapters of your life if you let it. If you build into your days certain rhythms, small rituals that bring light back into the corners of your day. Not grand plans, not major changes, but daily habits that slowly, gently help you reclaim joy, safety, and mental strength, one sunrise at a time. I want to share something with you, not as advice, but as a conversation between friends. Let's start with morning. There's something sacred about the early hours, before the phone rings, before the world asks anything of you, before the noise begins. That time is yours. Laura, a soft-spoken 67-year-old who lives alone in a little apartment filled with sunlight, once told me, "My mornings save me." When her husband passed, the days felt endless. Meals felt hollow. But one day, she decided to try something different. She got up early just before dawn and made herself a beautiful breakfast. Not rushed, not microwaved. She laid out the plate like she was expecting company. Eggs just the way she liked them, fresh fruit, a cloth napkin, music playing softly. She even lit a candle. And as she sat there eating alone but not feeling lonely, she realized something: I still deserve to be cared for, even if I'm the one doing the caring now. That morning ritual became her anchor. Because that's the quiet truth. We often overlook how you treat yourself sets the tone for how you feel. When you wake up and make your bed, prepare your meal with care, and dress yourself in something that makes you feel good, even if no one sees, you're telling yourself, I matter. That kind of attention becomes armor. Not cold and defensive, but warm, nourishing. It builds a kind of strength that no one else has to give you because you've begun giving it to yourself. Then there's the habit of movement. Brian, a retired mechanic who once spent his days on his feet, found that retirement and the solitude that came with it made him sluggish. He began to feel older than his age. His joints ached not just from wear and tear, but from stillness. One day he started walking. Not fast, not far, just around the block. Every morning. He said at first it felt silly, no destination, no purpose. But then something shifted. He began to notice things: the neighbor's garden, blooming, the warmth of the sun, the way his body slowly loosened with each step. That walk became his daily check-in with life. Movement, even the smallest kind, keeps your spirit in motion too. It tells your body, we're still here, we're still going. It's a way of saying yes to the day. And safety, that's something we don't often talk about openly, especially living alone. But it matters. Nicole, an 80-year-old widow who lives in a quiet suburb, made a habit of checking her doors and windows every night, not out of fear, but out of mindfulness. She installed motion lights and made sure her neighbors knew she was living alone. But beyond the physical habits, she did something even more powerful. She began calling one friend every evening. Just a quick check-in, a laugh, a few words shared. And that simple ritual made her feel protected, not just by locks and lights, but by connection. Because safety isn't just about alarms. It's about knowing someone will notice if you're not okay. So often we think of safety as something external. But part of it is internal, the safety of knowing you're seen. That someone will notice if the light in your window doesn't turn on. That you're still a part of the fabric of life, not a forgotten thread. Living alone can feel exposed, especially at night. But it can also feel deeply grounding if you build rituals of comfort into the fabric of your home. Light a lamp before the sun sets. Keep soft music playing in the evenings. Make your home a place that welcomes you, not just a place where you wait for someone else to arrive. Because here's the thing, you are the guest now, and also the host. and you deserve to be welcomed home by yourself. That's the first quiet transformation that begins when you live alone after 60. You stop asking the world to show up, and you start showing up for yourself. Not out of loneliness, not out of duty, but out of love. And in that space, the space between silence and choice, something remarkable begins to grow your sense of joy. There's a gentle kind of power in realizing you can be your own source of joy. It doesn't mean you're giving up on connection. It doesn't mean you don't miss companionship or long for shared laughter across the dinner table. What it does mean is that you've stopped putting your happiness entirely in someone else's hands. And that shift, that quiet inner shift, can bring more peace than you ever expected. One of the most surprising discoveries many people make after 60 is that solitude, when chosen and tended to, becomes a garden. And joy, like anything else, can be cultivated, not forced, not faked, grown slowly daily. That's what happened with Eric. After his wife passed and his 2 sons moved across the country, Eric's house began to echo with absence. He didn't know what to do with the stillness, so he filled it with television, with chores, with long naps that blurred one day into the next. Until one day, out of sheer curiosity, he picked up an old harmonica tucked away in a drawer. He hadn't played it since his 20s. He began to play softly, shakily at first. And then something inside him woke up. He made it a daily habit, just 10 minutes in the afternoon sitting by the window. That small moment of creativity lit a spark that warmed the rest of the day. It wasn't about becoming a musician. It was about becoming alive again. That's another quiet habit that builds strength when you live alone creating. Whether it's writing, gardening, baking, sketching, or even humming along to your favorite song, creating reminds you that you're still part of something larger than yourself, that you have something to give the world and yourself that's beautiful. Amber, a 65-year-old woman who had lived alone for over a decade, found herself sinking into what she called invisible days, the kind where you can't remember what you did because nothing felt like it mattered. She said the loneliness didn't scream, it whispered. So she made a small promise to herself every day she would do one thing that made her feel seen, not by others, by herself. Some days it was writing a few lines in a notebook. Other days it was putting on lipstick and her favorite blouse just to go out and buy bread. Sometimes it was watering her plants and talking to them like old friends. And one day it was taking a photo of the way the sun hit her kitchen table just right. She printed that photo and put it on her fridge with a little note that said, "This moment mattered." And it did, because she decided it did. That's the beautiful thing about these kinds of habits. They don't require applause. They don't need validation. They are small acts of self-respect. And when done consistently, they become a rhythm that supports your heart. Another quiet habit that brings strength is reaching out on your terms. Many people who live alone after 60 feel a strange tension, the ache of wanting connection, and the fear of being a burden. So they wait. They hope someone will call. They tell themselves not to bother anyone. But reaching out doesn't make you weak. It makes you brave. Melissa, who lives in a cozy townhouse by the sea, made a commitment to send one kind message a day, just one. A postcard to an old friend, a voice message to her niece, a silly photo to her brother. She said it made her feel like she was still part of the world. Some messages didn't get a reply. Others started conversations that lasted weeks. But what mattered most wasn't the response. It was the act of extending her presence into someone else's day. Loneliness can make you feel like you've disappeared, but connection, even small and simple, reminds you that you're still here, and so are they. And just as important as reaching out to others is reaching inward to your own thoughts. Journaling is something many people roll their eyes at until they try it. You don't need to be a writer. You don't even need full sentences. Just a few lines each day. What you noticed, what you felt, what you hoped for, what made you smile. It's not about documenting your life. It's about listening to yourself. Because the longer we go without expressing what's inside, the more life begins to feel flat. Nicole once told me that her journal became her most honest friend. "I don't filter myself there," she said. "I can cry, laugh, remember, dream. And I see patterns I didn't see before, that I'm stronger than I thought." And she is, so are you. And finally, there's the habit of choosing how you speak to yourself. Living alone means your inner voice gets louder. If that voice is kind, curious, gentle, it becomes your ally. But if it's harsh, judgmental, or defeated, it becomes your prison. You deserve a voice inside your head that sounds like someone who loves you. Speak to yourself like you would to your dearest friend, with warmth, with patience, with softness. Wake up and say, "Good morning, love." Make your coffee and whisper, "You're doing just fine." Walk past the mirror and smile, not because everything's perfect, but because you're here, still trying, still living. That inner tone becomes your home when the world is quiet. And in that home you will find strength, because living alone after 60 is not about just surviving the silence. It's about learning to dance in it. And sometimes when you stop waiting for the music to come from outside, you start to hear a melody that was always inside you, waiting to be noticed. There's something deeply comforting about the way your life begins to take shape again when you stop apologizing for your solitude and start honoring it. It's not always grand. Sometimes it's as quiet as a perfectly folded blanket, a plant that bloomed because you remembered to water it, a song you hum without even realizing it. But these little signs, they point to something much bigger. You are building a life that belongs to you again. After decades of caring for others, making space for their needs, their schedules, their noise, you finally get to ask, "What do I need today?" And in asking that question, you start returning home to yourself. Brandon, who once shared a busy home with 3 children and a wife who filled every room with conversation, now lives alone in a small house tucked beneath 2 oak trees. The first months after his divorce were unbearable, he said. The silence felt like punishment, a kind of echo chamber for his mistakes, his regrets. But over time, something shifted. He began making a list each morning, not a to-do list, but a to-feel list. Today he'd write, "I want to feel calm, I want to feel useful, I want to feel delighted." He didn't always hit the mark, but writing those words reminded him that his emotions mattered, that his inner world was just as important as the one outside his front door. One day he added, "I want to feel proud of how I spend my day." That day, he volunteered at a food pantry down the road, and afterward, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset, he whispered, "I do." That's another quiet habit that restores mental strength, doing something that connects you to others, not because you have to, but because you can. Contribution in any form tells you that you still belong to the human family. You don't need to be part of a crowd to be connected. You only need to offer something meaningful, a smile, a helping hand, a shared moment, and let that become your thread. Joy, too, has its place in solitude, and it often arrives when you least expect it. Nicole, who we've spoken about before, had a habit of watching the birds gather on her windowsill each morning. She gave them names, made up stories about their lives. "It sounds silly," she said, but to her it was sacred. "I stopped waiting for something big to make me happy," she told me, "and I started noticing the little things that already were." That's the heart of this journey. You're not chasing something new to fix the loneliness. You're learning to see what was always around you and within you more clearly. Joy isn't in the arrival of someone at your door. It's in the first bite of your favorite meal. It's in the way you laugh out loud at a show no one else is watching with you. It's in the way you keep showing up for your life even when no one else is watching. And with joy comes a kind of quiet confidence, a sense that you don't have to explain yourself anymore, that you don't have to wait for your children's approval or your friends' schedules or anyone else's permission to live a full day. Melissa, a retired teacher, found this confidence not through grand accomplishments, but through tiny acts of defiance against invisibility. She wore bright colors again. She said no when she didn't feel like attending events. She said yes when she did, even if it meant going alone. "I stopped narrating my loneliness like it was a tragedy," she said, "and I started treating it like a spacious new room I could decorate however I liked." And decorate it she did with candles, with classical music, with puzzles half finished and stories half written. And in that space, she remembered who she was before life told her she had to be everything for everyone. That's what happens when you begin to live from within instead of waiting for someone else to show up. You start walking with your head just a little higher, not out of arrogance, but out of peace. And yes, there are still moments of aching, that empty chair, that phone that stays silent, that memory that comes rushing back when you hear a certain song. But now those moments don't define the day. They're simply part of the landscape, like the shadows that make the sunlight warmer. You become your own steady companion. You become someone you can count on, and that changes everything. Because there's a kind of strength that isn't loud. It doesn't need to prove anything. It doesn't need applause. It's the strength of knowing you are enough, of trusting that your life in this very moment holds worth, that your presence is not lessened by solitude, it is clarified by it, and that the home you've created, the habits you've built, the quiet routines that fill your days, are evidence of a life still being lived with intention and grace. You don't need to chase joy. You only need to make space for it to arrive. And when it does, in the scent of dinner, cooking for one, in the warmth of your favorite blanket, in the softness of your own company, let it in. Because this season of living alone isn't the end. It's the unfolding of a different kind of beginning, one that doesn't ask for permission, one that honors the beauty of becoming whole even in the quiet. If you're still with me now, sitting in the quiet of your room, or maybe out on your porch with a soft breeze brushing your cheek, thank you. Thank you for letting me share this time with you. This wasn't a video about advice. It was a conversation, a gentle reaching out from one heart to another to remind you of something you may have forgotten in the quiet. You matter, not because someone else told you so, not because your calendar is full or your phone is ringing, but because you woke up today, made it through another sunrise, and kept showing up for your life even when it asked you to stand on your own. That's not small, that's strength. Quiet, courageous, dignified strength. Living alone after 60 isn't something everyone talks about. In fact, a lot of people avoid the topic altogether, as if solitude is something to be ashamed of, something to fix. But here in this little corner of the internet, I want to tell you something different. Living alone can be an act of becoming. It can be a season where you finally stop editing yourself for the comfort of others, where you listen more deeply to your own thoughts, where you decorate your time with things that light you up instead of drain you. And when the ache comes, because yes, it still does, you now know how to hold it gently. You don't let it consume you. You breathe through it, knowing it's just a part of being human, not a sign that anything is wrong with you. You have built a life inside the quiet, and that, my friend, is a sacred kind of life. You're not waiting for joy, you're planting it. You're not begging for love. You're becoming it for yourself, for your space, for the moments that unfold in simple, beautiful ways. And maybe you've realized something important along the way. You don't need to be surrounded to feel seen. You don't need to be busy to be fulfilled. You don't need to be anyone else's version of important to feel deeply whole. So now I'd like to ask you something, not as a creator to a viewer, but as a friend to a friend. How are you really doing? Have you found peace in your routines? Have you struggled with loneliness, some days more than others? What habits have helped you stand taller in your solitude? If anything in this video spoke to you, I would love, truly love, if you'd leave a comment below. Not just for me, for others who might be reading, for that woman who checks the comments at night, hoping to feel less alone, for the man who hasn't heard his own story reflected anywhere in months. You never know whose heart your words might reach. And if this message made you feel a little more grounded, a little more seen, I would be honored if you'd stay connected with me here. Click subscribe if it feels right, not for the algorithm, not for the numbers, but because we're building something gentle and real here, a space where being over 60 isn't the end of the conversation, but the beginning of a deeper one. You still have stories to tell. You still have laughter to share. You still have quiet mornings and soulful evenings ahead. You still have love, and not just to give to others, to give to yourself. The best thing about living alone isn't just the freedom, it's the chance to finally learn what it means to belong fully to yourself. So when you turn off this video, don't rush back into the noise. Sit with yourself for a moment. Look around your home not as a place you're passing time, but as a space you're shaping with care. You are not forgotten. You are not fading. You are still blooming in your own time, in your own way, with every soft step forward. And I'll be right here with you whenever you need a voice to remind you that you are enough. Always.